if you've struggled with chronic illness or have just felt dismissed by your doctor, you probably know the feeling of wanting a diagnosis so bad to have this validation that you're truly experiencing what you're experiencing. Well, Elizabeth Mays went through this as well. She struggled with several chronic illnesses, at one point had over 100 symptoms and was bedridden, and she was able to completely heal them over, the course of a journey. She definitely had some ups and downs. And the key to her healing was something that I haven't heard a single other person talk about. And she literally had to disconnect from her diagnoses and not take ownership of them. But as she describes it, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to take care of your health. And that's exactly what she did. We talk about what the chronic illness journey looks like, how it affects us, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as well as what you can really do to create space for yourself for healing. And we also talk a lot about breathwork, which is a big key to her healing and an incredible tool that, again, no one is talking about when it comes to healing. I always love talking with Elizabeth. She's someone who's become a really, incredible resource to me in my professional practice and my personal life as well. And such an incredible resource. This conversation brings so many gems that even if you don't, you've never had chronic illness, you don't really identify with that. There are so many gems in this conversation that I think all of us can walk away with and really implement into our life and make some positive change, even in just how we think about ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, how we think and feel about our body and our diagnoses and our symptoms. There's so much power here and so much hope that, especially if you're struggling with chronic illness, oh my gosh, you're going to want to listen to this all the way through, maybe a few times through, because there's so much wisdom here that you can benefit from to really change your story as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat today.
Yeah. So, I've been so fascinated by your story, your personal story, and then just how you're able to help people in the world now. And I'd love to just start there. Basically, you had a lot of chronic illnesses, and at one point you were bedridden. And what you'd told me before, you didn't think you ever could get out of that. You're feeling really overwhelmed by that, but you kind of went a different direction than most people with chronic illness did. And you're now at a place where you're literally just thriving. So I'd love to hear about that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I had kind of always been like the sick kid, like all growing up. I'd always had stomach issues. I would always get sick. I would always get hurt. And I just kind of didn't really think too much of it. And then once I was about 27 and I started getting really unwell. I would start to go on walks and like forget where I was or where I lived or what was going on. I would like shake and tremor constantly. Like I remember filling out a symptom tracker once and I had like over 112 symptoms. Like it was just like my body was so freaked out. And but like going to doctors, they're like, well, your labs are normal. Your labs are normal. Like go to a psychiatrist. And so I had spent at this point like a decade going on and off different like antidepressants and anxiety medicine. And then they're like, well, those don't work. So you must be bipolar. And so then we started medication for bipolar. And then they're like, well, you've exhausted all of the medication options. Like, you're just going to have to learn how to live with this. Like, I recommend you go find Jesus. And I was like, dang, okay. So I went and I met with a Christian counselor. I was in a Bible study. And so I asked her to meet with me and sat down across from her and she was like, honey, like you are not okay. And I was like, I know, I feel like that, but doctors keep telling me everything's totally fine. And that, I just needed to, essentially go find Jesus. And she was like, oh, I know a broken spirit when I see one, and that's not what's going on. Like you're physically not okay. And she had had a daughter who had had some chronic illness. So she recommended me to this naturopath doctor who is also a chiropractor. She's like, but you can only see him in person and he's in San Francisco. And I was like, okay. And this is before I knew anything about functional medicine or anything. So I was just like, I'll do anything. So I fly up. I was so unwell. I like had to go out on leave, like went to go see this doctor, did some testing, and then all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, you have celiac, you have nervous system exhaustion, you have extreme aluminum poisoning, you have mercury poisoning, your adrenals are fatigued, your nervous system is exhausted." And then as I started to discover functional medicine, all of a sudden, all of these other diagnoses started rolling in, like endometriosis, POTS, like MCAS, like all of these things. And mind you, I'm like not working. I'm sleeping 18 hours a day. I'm shaking. I can barely remember my own name. And now I have functional health like protocols for like 20 different diagnoses. And I was like, this is not going to work. And so I was feeling at a loss and couldn't really like take care of myself very well. Like I could barely stand. Like I couldn't shower, I couldn't stand in the kitchen. And so I kind of had a radical, I've always been like a 0 or 10,000 kind of person. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go spend 3 months in Thailand and Bali and do some like wellness retreats. Cause like then you're like making it fun, right? You're like, oh, like, but people clean your room for you and make food for you and do all of those things for you and give you some structure. And so while I was there, that really started my journey and discovery into breath work and mindset and more like where science meets, spirituality and how that can come together. And then when I got back, I was just scrolling on Instagram. Like so many people hate on Instagram, but I think it like saved me. Like just being able to be exposed to things that aren't in your, immediate day to day. But I came across a breathwork facilitator and I was like, I'd kind of learned about some breathwork in Bali and had some crazy experiences. And so I was like open to it. And then I started working with her one on one. And all of a sudden, it was just like, no pun intended, but I had like the breathing room to like start living life again. And so, yeah, discovering breathwork really just was a huge turning point and changed everything. Like from there on, it was like everything just got so much easier, like so much of chronic illness is shifting lifestyle. But when you're just like, oh, I need to restrict my diet, or I have to do this new workout, or I have to do this new thing, or I have to take these 27 supplements, like it's so overwhelming. I just couldn't do it. But what was interesting when I was really consistent with the breath, and I loved breath work because you can do it in bed, you can do it in your pajamas. Like, you don't like it's so easy to just roll over and hop on a Zoom call, And so it met me where I was. And then all of a sudden, I was able to just I was able to shower again and I was able to start cooking again. And then it was like all of a sudden, I was like, wait, I don't even want to drink alcohol anymore. And it just became so easeful to then be able to shift into a new lifestyle that's been able to support me, like getting my energy back. And now I'm working and I have friends and I do my to-do lists and I'm traveling. It's like I was told I would never be able to do any of that again. And I should just give up and accept and work on a new life. And I was like, no. So yeah,
I
that's
love
kind of
it.
like at a high level how
Yeah.
I got here.
I love it. Well, I love that you had this tenacity to defy that because yeah, what a hard position to be in. It just sounds impossible to dig your way out of it. Especially, I mean, it's interesting that that you went so drastically also from being completely dismissed. You don't have anything. It's in your head. You're just broken to, well, you have this laundry list of things wrong with you. And like you said, the laundry list of protocols to do. That must have been so overwhelming to have that shift. And was there any what did that feel like? Was there some validation in there mixed with overwhelm? What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the immediate was so much relief because it was like I knew I wasn't crazy. Like, but I had started to tell myself, like, yeah, maybe you are like super bipolar. Maybe you have all these crazy, and like I'm starting to imagine this life of like, oh my gosh, like what if I am like really seriously mentally ill and it's just going to keep getting worse? And so I get goosebumps talking about it because it's like it's so emotional, but that's like the headspace that I, was in when I was at that place. And like a lot of, cutting out I had a lot of mental health challenges, we'll say that. Like, I was, I was very depressed. I, had dark thoughts. I was very anxious. I had lots of nightmares. And so all of that, like, was very real too. And so when I had some of the diagnosis, it was just like, oh my gosh, so much validation. Like, I describe it, it was like lighting up like Christmas trees, it was almost like, I do it, I do it.
Mhm.
But yeah, then the overwhelm like very, very quickly sets in. So, and when I got the celiac diagnosis in particular, it was like, oh, great, you just cut out gluten. And then I started to hear all these stories online, right? Like, oh my gosh, cutting out gluten like changed my life. And I'm like, okay, amazing. Now I have this like one thing, right? That's just gonna like fix me. And so there was overwhelm, there was like validation, there was hope, there was excitement, and I went gluten free. And the first 4 weeks were brutal. I had such a bad die off period. But then it was like the mood stuff really lifted. Like I didn't have night terrors anymore. And like, I wasn't just so consumed with like the depression and the anxiety pieces. But I still couldn't get out of bed and I still wasn't feeling well, and so it was it in the beginning, before I really discovered breath work, it was a lot of, like, with the diagnosis, these it's like, "Oh, this thing will fix you," and so there was so much hope and then just, like, let down, and then you're back to, like, "Oh my gosh, like, why isn't it working for me? I see all of these other stories about these people," or, like, "Oh, just detox the heavy metals and then you'll feel amazing," and I'm like,
Mhm.
I just didn't feel that much better after all of the detox protocols, and so there was quite a bit of spin with a lot of different protocols before I eventually found breath work, and it wasn't like those protocols didn't help, it was like, as soon as I had the right foundation, then it just became exponential, and all of
Mhm.
that work that I had been putting in, just like, it just immediately started helping.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your story in this because I think that probably so many people with chronic illness really identify with this. Again, being discounted, especially more by the conventional medical approach, not to say that all conventional doctors are, like they don't care or something, but there aren't tools there to meet those diagnoses. I mean, maybe more so nowadays. I see more conversation about things like MCAS and celiac in the conventional world also. But then on the flip side, functional medicine, it's not like it was just, "Oh, that was the perfect fix for you." I love functional medicine, of course, because that's what I, specialize in, but I see that piece also. Even on as a medical practitioner, I see people coming to me where they're like, "I couldn't even do the protocol because it was so overwhelming. They want me to do all these strict things. It's just too overwhelming. I didn't even open a single thing. I couldn't do it." And so I appreciate you sharing this, that there's no one perfect route that is just going to heal us. Like there's no external thing that is ever going to be the one thing that you need, or probably very infrequently. That, what most of us probably need and what it sounds like you really needed and what you thrived really, really with was shifting your nervous system and like your body being able to feel safe,
Yeah.
and then, like you said, having this, like, breathing room to actually be able to start implementing things and making some change. Like, I you know, I think it all works so beautifully together. That was one of my recent experiences actually, like, was when I met you earlier late last year, was this experience that I was having too of there's this gap in medicine that we're missing, and I think that big gap is our nervous system,
Mhm.
that we can't just science our way through it and like, these are all the things that you need to do. We need to be able to connect with ourselves and feel safe and know how to breathe. And, we have so many insults against that now.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned something interesting too about like science your way through it because like that is the route that like I'm very I was no woo-woo at all. I still don't really like identify with that, like even though I'm now a very spiritual person, because like the way I came to this was like very scientific. Because a lot of what I was starting to do after, Thailand and Bali was like studying biomolecular medicine and how your brain, when you experience emotions, creates different peptides that connects with different, parts of your body, and like understanding the very physiological like reaction and connection of like what goes on in the mind. and, studying quantum physics and how energy works and, polyvagal theory and how the nervous system works. Because like with, some people who experience success with protocols, that's great. When it's not working, it doesn't mean the protocol's wrong. Like, I think the other big thing for me was mindset. And one of the biggest things, like, if I feel like I should get this tattooed, is like, yes, and. And, like conventional medicine is great for what it is, and functional medicine is great for what it is. And if your nervous system is so dysregulated, and it could be dysregulated from a few things, right? It could be chronic stress, it could be trauma, it could be, infection, it could be, I think for me, I had like a base genetic predisposition to being very sensitive. So, like, there's a lot of factors that could go into that. And addressing the root of that is also part of it. But a lot of things just get stuck in the body. And so breath work really works with the body. And then once your nervous system's chronically dysregulated, it just like prevents any of these other protocols from being able to work effectively. Because when your body is in survival, it's like we're not prioritizing healing, we're not prioritizing repair, we're not prioritizing anti-inflammation, we're prioritizing like life-saving types of things. And, it's like more of that, like you're constantly scanning the environment and you're like, what's going on? And, that is a classic sign that your nervous system is really stuck in that survival state over the healing state. And so once you can, safety, co-regulation, once you have some of that, which is where validation becomes so key because we can't feel safe if we're feeling crazy all the time.
Mhm.
So once our nervous systems are able to be more regulated, then all of a sudden your body starts to repair itself and these protocols start to actually help you move the needle.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that it really is completely scientific and true also. It isn't just woo-woo and, oh, there's energy, okay, it's like all made up. It truly is. There's so much that we don't fully understand and haven't fully documented because we can't see it. We can't always measure it, but we can measure the changes of it. Meaning like, okay, maybe we can't see or feel or touch the energy, but we can see the changes that it has in our body. And I completely agree with you that hypervigilance that can happen, it does not allow for healing. It
Yeah.
only allows you from running away from a tiger. And your body isn't even designed to run away from a tiger, quote unquote, for that long. Like when you're under chronic stress for so long, that's where we have all these things going on. They're in just like these cycles of inflammation and activation that it just can't even calm down with anything other than like it needs that safety to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I get, caught up a lot in is some of the conversation around, well, like chronic illness seems fairly unique to America and also women, 80% of those of us with chronic illness, are women.
Mhm.
And, how do we kind of explain some of that, especially with the nervous system when there are people who are in, really intense states all around the world that are truly survival. And I think part of that is because of the unique time that we live in. Like, America has introduced so many toxins everywhere in every facet. So there's so much more load on the body. But
Mhm.
then also like little things like, like being on our phones, like that's very, it's like producing dopamine and depleting that and like dysregulating your nervous system. And so, and then we have all of these, social dynamics that, we have being in the type of world that we live in, here. And so there's just such a higher load on the body that's, it's not, it's our, our nervous system's very primal. And
Mhm.
especially with the introduction of technology, the rate of change is so high. So like the amount of disconnect from our nervous systems being able to catch up to this like extremely modern world that we're living in is like a huge part of all of this disruption as well. So there's so much that goes into understanding like how the nervous system is affected and how it relates to chronic illness. And that's again, it starts to get overwhelming, right? Like, oh my gosh, like once I started looking at toxins, it was like, I have to get rid of everything. And it, again, like then you get the overwhelm. And so that's where like coming back to the breath, it's like it just simplifies all of that. And I maybe to go on a little scientific kind of rabbit hole too, since we're here, but like, when it comes to the toxins and that kind of thing, something that I love about breath work is it's like one tool and it's so multifaceted. Like active breath can increase lymph flow up to like 15%, right? Like awesome. Like now we're detoxing, and like it can help create neuropeptides in your brain, norepinephrine, serotonin, like that kind of thing. So that can help with your mood, it can really help regulate your gut and stimulate gut healing. It can help reduce inflammation. And so you have this one tool that's so powerful for all of the facets of, really coping and living and being in the world that we're living into.
I love that. I love that. And, it was an interesting, piece to my learning experience as a doctor. It was, yeah, at one point I was getting more into detox and learning more about that and really, um, you know, learning some intense protocols and things like that. And one thing that really struck me as I was learning about our detox pathways in a different way, 'cause it's funny, you really don't learn about detox pathways in conventional medical school. It is not discussed. So coming into functional medicine and learning about detoxification and really just how our body normally gets rid of things, like the word detox can sometimes be kind of triggering to people of that, oh, it's a cleanse or something. No, it's literally how our body gets rid of things. And we think, oh, that's our liver, our digestive tract, it's urinating, sweating, but also our breath. Like we think about the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but we don't think about that our breath is a form of detoxification. And like you mentioned, stimulating stimulating so many different things. It's so powerful and it's completely taken for granted because we're barely breathing in our current lifestyles. We're hunched over, we're stressed out, really heavy, like shallow breathing, and
Mhm.
no one will talk to you about your breath. No doctor will. I mean, barely ever. So it's really a very underutilized tool in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you kind of said something that, a lot of people talk like, how could breath be such a powerful tool? Well, it's because a lot of us are these very shallow breathers. And like, even in, my own, like, I would notice all the time that I just wouldn't be breathing. Like, I would catch myself holding my breath all the time because my nervous system was so like dysregulated. And it's funny, I remember my dad one time kind of asking me because my poor parents like they want to help so bad, but I was like, well, are you breathing? And I don't want to sound like negative or like talking down to you or whatever, but I was like, it's funny that you say that because like no, like I actually do catch myself not breathing a lot. And so when we do breath work, there's a certain amount of like awareness and intention that goes into that. There's a couple different styles of breath, that we can play with. Something else that, some people have tried breath work, but a lot of the common go-to tools out there, I've heard box breathing. I think it's so well intentioned. A lot of people are like, oh, my therapist told me about it or whatever. But the thing with box breathing is that you have to count. It's like in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Which, like, if you're in a really dysregulated place, counting and trying to, like, oh, am I doing it right? Am I getting the right count? Am I doing all that? You're actually just like introducing more, tension. And so that kind of breath work can actually be counterintuitive. So when we're talking about breath work, it's really about working with the body, doing, specific types of breathing that allow for your body to actually be safe and not feel performative, or not feel painful or not feel forced, that all starts to become, really important as well. So there's not, people always come to me and they're like, oh, am I breathing right? Or like, I feel like I don't breathe right. It's like, there's no like right or wrong way to breathe. There's just meeting your body where it is to help it along its journey. Like, because I think, just to get into some basic mechanisms of breath, when you breathe in, that activates your sympathetic nervous system. And when you exhale, that activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And so here's where HRV becomes an interesting measurement of your nervous system because when you breathe in, activating the sympathetic, your heart rate will increase. And then parasympathetic decreases the heart rate. So, in theory, if your nervous system is very regulated, your heart rate should actually be increasing, decreasing, increase like pretty consistently. And so that creates a high heart rate variability. But when your nervous system is dysregulated, it doesn't activate quite the same with your systems. And so then you have like a lower, you know, HRV. And so I like to describe it as sympathetic is like the gas pedal and parasympathetic is like the brake. And not one or the other is good or bad. You need both to be safe, right? It's just a matter of using them in the right way to be able to navigate life, you know, safely, appropriately, you know, that kind of thing. And so a lot of nervous system regulation with breath work is figuring out how do we meet the body where it is to allow for that more appropriate orientation of gas and brake within the nervous system.
I love that visual. That's really helpful, I think. And even describing heart rate variability too, it can be hard for people to understand that. I think that's a beautiful example of it's almost like waves going. It should go up and down, and be very flexible rather than being rigid and, stuck most likely in the sympathetic more so of just
Yeah.
drive. So being able to have that flexibility. And that's a beautiful way to describe breath work too, because I do think I'm glad you mentioned it because I think a lot of people think of the very masculine, active breath work that's become really popular, like with Wim Hof and things, not to discount that because it can be a great tool also, but it is very active. And for someone, mostly women, especially who have a lot going on that are really stressed out, that are really high achieving, or those with chronic illness, may not do well with that kind of breath work, especially right off the bat. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate you sharing that it's not all just one type of breath work. It's using your breath in different ways, or even just being more intentional with your breath so that you are actually breathing and not just holding your breath
Yeah.
and being able to use that as a tool. I mean, I love that, for one, our breath is a reflection of our nervous system, and that when you do catch yourself, I'll catch myself too. I'm so much more aware now, which I appreciate. And I'll be able to catch myself. Oh, wow, my breath is really up in my chest right now.
Mhm.
Okay. I can see that my nervous system is then activated. I'm a little bit stressed out or something. And then I can then use my breath to impact my nervous system to say, okay, I'm going to take a few deep, slow breaths and re-regulate. So it can go both ways. And I think the way you describe that is really beautiful. That it's like it can be this fluid thing too, that doesn't have to be completely forced, but also can be modified to support your body in the ways that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I wanted to go back to, not to skip around too much because I love our natural segue to breath work, but to go back to your story. We were speaking a little bit earlier about our identity with chronic illness, and I wanted to revisit that because, again, it sounds like, even with your journey too, you had this. At first, it was almost like you were completely like forced to be disconnected from your body. You were literally questioning your sanity and that, like, are these symptoms even true? It feels to me like there was this big disconnect. And then quickly you had this validation with your symptoms. But I think a lot of people with chronic illness then really cling to their diagnoses and embody them very much so of like, I have MCAS, I have POTS, and this is who I am, and I have to live in a certain way. Can you speak to that and maybe like kind of give some guidance even to someone who maybe has chronic illness and is struggling with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I Breathwork was huge, but without the identity work, I don't think it would have created that foundation. So I'm so happy to be circling back to this as well. Because your identity is so powerful and influences your subconscious in so many ways. So anytime you're making statements like I am, like I am chronically ill or I am celiac, or I have, that those are identity statements and it's not who you are. And really I've really de-identified with a lot of them. I know we chat about this, but I had to go back and write down and like think about all of my diagnoses because when people ask me now, I'm like, I kind of glitch because I just like, and I kind of jokingly respond, I was like, well, it depends on what you believe. Because, like, I have come to believe that a lot of these diagnoses, while they were so validating and served such a purpose in my journey and being able to find a way to really heal myself, like, they really just describe a cluster of symptoms and aren't actually the root of what's going on. And so when you are identifying with these, because a lot of times too, you'll see people or doctors who say like, oh, there's nothing you can do for fibromyalgia. It's just a lifelong condition. You just have to live with it. There's no cure. And so I just like never believed that. I was like, there's no way I am going to buy into a narrative that my body is just never going to get better. And so de-identifying with those was huge because what that allows for is space to really focus on like, okay, I mentioned there's several different routes of like what's going on, but like it allowed me to focus more on like, what is the root of some of my chronic stress? Or, how can I go back and heal some of the, traumas that I've been through? And, how can I start to really focus on that? And really shifting, I think the biggest thing is shifting my relationship with my body in that process too. Like, I used to say probably 100 times a day, like, "My stomach hates me. My stomach hates me."
Mm.
And, like, that is such a detrimental thing for us to be feeding to ourselves and our body, and I had been creating, like, actual tension. Like, that mindset creates chronic tension within the body that also kind of keeps it stuck, and really starting to see, like, symptoms as messengers. Like, what is it trying to tell me? Like, and really shifting, especially with nervous system and identity work, it's like understanding that your body is always working to protect you. Like it's never trying to destroy, it doesn't hate you, like it loves you. And it's trying to get your attention, and so really being able to understand that piece as well and shift that relationship and, like, shift that inner critic of, constantly, because anytime you're like, "Oh," like, I used to say also 100 times a day, like, "Oh, sorry, I suck. Sorry, I suck." It's just like, that's also a really, like, harsh, you know, like, narrative to be feeding your body all of the time, and I think that's where, Candace Pert's work in biomolecular medicine and understanding that these thoughts and these emotions create very real physical reactions, like, being mindful of your relationship with your health and with your body and with yourself and with your thoughts is huge, so shifting that. And then I think the other piece too that kind of I see a lot with chronic illness, and around like identity and mindset is this like the over identification with it and almost like learned helplessness and an excuse to just say like, oh, well, this is just what it is. And like kind of falling into more of that like victim mindset. Like, it's not my fault. Like I have this, I feel like when you get a diagnosis, it's like, oh, see, well, it's the fibromyalgia. It's not, or,
Mhm, mhm.
the impasse, whatever it might be, right? And I read Extreme Ownership, and that was another like huge identity mindset shift for me because like all the time I'm telling people it's not your fault and it is your responsibility.
Mm.
And, at first it sounds like it kind of stinks to say that like chronic illness is a lot a self-healer's journey, but there's something so empowering in that and the life that you find on the other side. Like I always tell people I live a life I never knew to dream of because I have found so much more alignment. I have worked on myself so much to be able to like have so much peace and joy and gratitude and belonging. And like, like even just being here, meeting you and being on a podcast, you're like,
Yes.
oh, cool. Like, like I never would have been this person 7 years ago if I hadn't taken on this mindset of it's not my fault and it is my responsibility. And so I think those are like the really big identity mindset pieces that like partnered with breath, like really, really just helped. It became exponential once I figured those two pieces out. So, and for everyone out there who is listening, who is in this situation where you're chronically ill and trying everything, like Something that was so great was, like, all of that work that I had done before nervous system and breath work, it's not like I had to, like, start over. I kind of saw the, like, nervous system and mindset work as like a dam, and so you had all of this work building up, and then as soon as you were able to release the dam, it's like, it just all of a sudden it takes off. So, I think that's another thing too, like, even if something is not working yet, it may just need a little bit of foundation for it to really, for you to see a lot of results. So I think that's the other thing too. A lot of people with chronic illness will say like, "Oh, I tried that and it didn't work." And it's like, "Yes, and."
Mhm, mhm. Oh, I love that. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. That's
Yeah.
so powerful. I mean, I can see that absolutely too. I haven't personally struggled with, a major chronic illness, but I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I can see that sort of like what you described as learned helplessness. I don't think it's intentional, of course. People again, we have this thought process of, "Oh, I need to go to the doctor. They're gonna fix me. They're gonna give me a thing to heal myself." And it really is like we're the only ones that can heal ourselves, really. There is no like guru or any doctor that it will just have the magic key and just be able to give it to us. We have to be the ones to feed ourselves, live a certain way, breathe, sleep a certain way. It's all really our responsibility.
Mhm.
And that's actually a very empowering thing that if we just take that ownership, while it can feel really crappy initially, especially when we're feeling terrible. We're like, "Oh my God, this is all on me. Are you kidding me?"
Yep.
But it really, it is. And that's where too, in my own journey as a doctor too, I had to shift away from where, we, especially in conventional medical school, we're taught this paternalistic approach of you tell the patient this, they either can be compliant or non-compliant. And especially in the hospitals, it's like, oh, so and so, they won't do this and that.
Mm.
And I had to unlearn that and see a different perspective of, you know what, these are human beings. This is their body. Who are we even to tell them what to do? It's our honor to be able to help and guide them. And now in my practice, it's very much, I'm like, I'm your guide. I have the experience and the knowledge. I've worked with other people in your shoes, but you're the one living it. So you tell me, like, what are your instincts? What are your insights? Tell me if something is working or isn't working because, I'm just here to support you on your journey.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you can speak to that. And I think that's a really powerful shift that people can make. And even just in, like you said, just in the way they're talking to themselves or the way they describe their illness. Like, I'm struggling with POTS right now rather than I have POTS or something like that. You can just, those little semantics can make a big difference in how we're even just perceiving what's happening in our body.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And like, while especially with chronic illness, it is in large part a self-healer journey. Something that I missed for a while that I have really come to understand is that with nervous system, safety helps and co-regulation is also really important. Like, we are human beings, we are meant to be in relation, and even being around, people who are aligned and regulated can be really helpful. And so while there is a lot of self-responsibility, there's also a lot of value in healing and community as well. And, being and it's a new because it's not just being around anyone, right? Like, the nervous system needs to be around people who are also regulated, or at least, like, working on that. And like, the biggest thing is being around people who aren't judgmental, who are supportive, who are capable of hearing you, seeing you, understanding you, believing you. And that's where a lot of chronic illness people struggle as well, because they may have loved one. Like, my family loves me so much, and they do not understand, and my nervous system felt that for a long time. And so only when I was able to find other people and build community, like, the second I met you, I was like, "Yes, like, you get it, you see, yes, yes, yes."
I love that.
And meeting people who are kind of in that similar space is also extremely important when we're talking about healing and regulating the nervous system.
That's such an important point because even I could imagine you said yourself, you were kind of a sick kid growing up. And so even though your family loves you and is trying to support you, they're probably perpetuating that narrative too of, oh, but you're the sick kid, remember? You can't do those things. Like, this is your reality. And even though it's out of a place of love, I can see that being a really big roadblock to get over until you have a community, yes, that maybe maybe understands what you've gone through and what you've been through, but also is giving that space to what you could be.
Right.
And you as like almost like sometimes like in life, we get to a new level and we're like, certain people have to fall away, certain relationships and different environments and jobs or whatever have to leave. And we need kind of new people
Mhm.
where we are now to like, okay, yeah, I see you as this like vibrant person. When I met you, I would never imagine until you told me that you had all these chronic illnesses. I was like, oh, wow, really? So, and sometimes that's really helpful to say, like, like you said, to make that possible, to co-regulate, to, help you establish that as your reality, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because and that's been by far the hardest part for me because, like, it has required that I make all new friends and, it has, like, been interesting to, like, work on the dynamics with my family and how that feels and make all new friends and things like that, and so this is part of why I love that you're building a community, I'm building we met in a community, we're in community together, and so it's just it's so important to be intentional about where you're spending your time and who you're around. And I kind of went backward. I do everything the hard way too. I just love learning. I like cut a lot of like people out before I invited new in because it was like it was easier for me to see in the moment like where there was misalignment. And it's not that they're bad. I think blaming can become really easy with chronic illness and it's just that it's just not aligned. And they could be supportive and non-judgmental and be able to see and hear other people. It's just maybe not with me, and that's fine. And so I had started to realize where I wasn't in healthy co-regulation and where I wasn't having healthy boundaries before I really understood what good looked like. Because I think that's the other thing. If you've never experienced a healthy, safe, I didn't know what the word safe meant until like a year ago. Oh, wait, I don't have any safe relationships. That's hard. That's a hard place to be. And so uh, good news is there's lots of things out there. And, if you are in that place, like definitely reach out to one of us. But yeah, it takes a lot of intentionality and courage. And, there are people out there though where it's like the other side is so worth it. Like it's so worth it to trust yourself and go all in and, invest. I always think about investing, like I'm always investing in myself and things either kind of drain you or invest in you or, I think about everything as like a nutrient or a toxin. And so just being really discerning of like what is right and good for me and what is not, and staying away from blaming and labels of bad. Like I really don't use good and bad. I think that's another big mindset shift. Like something that you mentioned earlier about that I've been really passionate about is that they don't teach detox pathways in medical school. And a lot of what I see in the chronic illness space is like, oh, there's so much medical gaslighting. And I used to subscribe to that. But gaslighting implies like an intentional malicious nature. And like the reality is that most doctors want to help people genuinely, and like they weren't taught, they don't have the tools, they don't have the personal experience, yet to really be able to like show up for you in a way that you needed. And that doesn't invalidate your experience or your feelings, but creating tension and like, oh, conventional medicine is bad or these friends are bad, it can actually still perpetuate more harm. And so, yeah, I think really just continuing to seek out alignment more so than like good, bad.
That's a great point. Yeah, because those things absolutely affect us too, like you said. And I agree. I mean, there is a lot, there is medical gaslighting too. But yeah, I think it's almost like, when you're healing a trauma or forgiving a relationship, whether it be, a parent or something like that, it's like having that thought process of, they were doing their best,
Yeah.
sort of forgiving them for that. Just like, okay, even when I'm working with patients and we're talking about, say, referring them to a specialist, we have a conversation oftentimes of these are their tools. These are
Yeah.
what they're going to be able to offer. So we're not going to go there expecting them to completely understand our entire functional medicine approach. we're going there for the colonoscopy or something like that.
Exactly.
Just yesterday, I had a conversation with a patient who was like, my gastroenterologist, it was the head of one of the big hospital systems here. And they're like, they just kept putting me on stronger and stronger medications without talking about why the symptom was even coming up. And they were feeling worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they,
Those are the tools that
yeah,
they
they have their tools, they have their toolbox, and they may not have the education or understanding, unfortunately, of why the symptoms are happening, and we have to keep that in mind. And, it can be very easy to be angry at people and blame them. But I think that does put that, negative energy in us too, that, just healing it and letting it go and forgiving it and finding the person who's aligned with you can be very powerful just in general for anyone dealing
Yeah,
with
exactly.
things.
And that's where the yes and becomes so important because, like, in a perfect world, should a doctor be able to help you when you don't feel well? Like, yeah, sure. Like that feels really unfair. That feels really frustrating. And that is all so valid. And like, there are ways that can help. So yeah, it's that back to that, like, yes, and yes, and. And, like, yeah, like, I think the biggest thing too, it's like, yes, like, you are so valid, like, yes, no one knows your body better than you. So, yeah, it's very nuanced and tricky to kind of navigate, and once you can really start to hold space for all of these things and know how to navigate, because I think conventional medicine's still really important. I think ruling out what conventional medicine does support and cover is still really important. Like, you don't want to miss anything either. And so I really view conventional medicine as like taking things off the table and making sure there's not something that I can't handle through functional medicine or through my own or through the breath. And so it's, like with people, right? It's like understanding the role that all of these things play and not over relying on one person to fulfill too much that's not really within their wheelhouse, so.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, so perfectly described. Well, honestly, I think this conversation has been so beautiful, and so I hope that the person listening who maybe is struggling with chronic illness can feel this hope and this possibility that they have, that yes, it's hard, and they can also heal, and they can feel vibrant, and they can have a reality that they never even knew to dream of. Like you were saying, I think that that alone is so powerful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to just leave the listener, maybe a final thought or any other tips that you want to share?
It's funny because as you said that, I was like, "This is why I just love, like, working with you because you just I was like, "Yes, that's exactly where I was gonna go." Because yeah, I think if I were to leave on any note, it would be there is hope, and, you don't have to listen to anyone telling you that this is a lifelong thing or that it's incurable, and even if you feel like you've tried everything, like, there is hope and healing is possible, and I believe you. I hear you. I see you.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for so much for taking the time and sharing your story. I know it can feel so vulnerable to share your story, but it's so incredibly powerful to share your unique experience. So I'm so thankful for you. You had a offer for people listening, is that right?
Yeah, I if there are people out there who are interested in exploring breath work and you're interested, then definitely reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at ITS Elizabeth Mays, or I don't know if you have some podcast notes, but I'm offering free breathwork sessions for anyone who's like really working to understand this or explore. And maybe you've tried breath work and it hasn't helped and you want to understand why. So if you want to connect and try what's really been helpful for me, I would love to connect with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes so people can go there to grab that. And honestly, it's such an incredible tool. I mean, I think especially because of your experience, people dealing with chronic illness, please go see her. She's incredible. But I think for everyone, especially again, I mean, I specialize in supporting women, and I don't think I've ever met a woman in my practice who could not benefit from a little bit more nervous system support, a little bit more just like nourishment and caring for her. So I think everyone could benefit from you. That's why you're also, for those of it, those listening who are actually patients, Elizabeth also is part of our practice now. doing health coaching and breathwork facilitation also. This is how much I just adore you and believe in you and what you do. I was like, please come join us. So I'm so grateful to have you as a resource. And thank you so much for being here today too.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.